We need to move on to the main story of the day. And a man has been arrested in connection with the death on Saturday afternoon of Esther Martin, who had popped round to her daughter and son-in-law's house in Jaywick in Essex to look after her 11-year-old grandson. Now, the house, one of her daughters claims, contained 8 XL bully dogs, or XL bully types. There are 2 adults and 6 puppies. Now, Esther's daughter Kelly said the puppies had started fighting and that Esther had been told if this happened, and I quote, to put a broom in among them to distract them. And it was apparently this which may have caused the 2 adult dogs to then turn on Esther. Now, her grandson ran screaming from the house for help, luckily was saved from the attack as a result. But when police arrived, Esther was pronounced dead at the scene. Now, Jason, this is a fairly horrific story. A man's under arrest, so we can't comment much about some of the detail for contempt of court reasons. And we have to be careful what we say. And I would ask those in the comments to be a bit careful and thoughtful about the fact we don't know quite what happened and nothing's been proven yet either. But I thought that Rishi had banned XL bully dogs. We've been talking about it for a long time. The Mirror's campaigned for it. The ban was agreed and it finally came into force 4 days ago. So how come the attacks are still happening?
Well, the problem is that there are loopholes in here. So under the new laws, you have to have the dog on a muzzle outside the home. The dog should be registered and it should also be neutered. But that doesn't apply to within the home. So that's the first issue. The second issue, and I'm talking very broadly here because we don't know the incidents of this case. Yeah, this was a first step, but the problem with the Dangerous Dogs Act is it prescribes certain dogs, and in this case, this is not the same problem as emerged with the XL bullies. That you can also have crossbreeds, and legislating for crossbreeds is incredibly difficult because how do you exactly define a dog which could have kind of come from 2 or 3 different kind of breeds? So that's another issue.
Around the legislation, they can't they, by a bit of interbreeding, and it does sort of seem that if it's about neutering and registering and getting the license and so on, if you don't take them out of the home, as you said, you don't have to muzzle them and you don't really have to necessarily do anything much to register them. You won't be under much pressure to do it. And of course, if you leave them in the house, they're going to go slightly stir crazy anyway and have behavioural problems. June says they won't be able to do a total ban on these animals because there will be people who will breed them. The certification is just not enough. The man who owned these dogs, well, we can't talk about that. They were his dogs, and therefore it was his crime. And dogs like this are dangerous. I just remind people to be a bit careful about the person who's under arrest. He is entitled to a fair trial and we can't prejudge any of it. But the ban came in after a Mirror campaign. Okay, it was pretty simple, really. It was just a case of adding XLs to the list of breeds that are already banned under the Dangerous Dogs Act, I think, if I'm right, which means, as Jason said, if you want to keep one, you have to meet certain requirements. Now, at this stage, we don't know if the dogs in question had been registered or not, but it's got to be said, it's thought there are tens of thousands of XL bullies who have been registered. Some of them, as we've just seen in that footage, waggy, happy, well-behaved creatures. And I suppose if they've got good and caring owners, well, that's just dandy. They're going to go and get them registered, and that's just dandy. But if you're not a good and caring owner, inclined perhaps, as June said, to breed them at home for cash, you won't have any reason to sign up to that particular law, perhaps. And you would, in fact, try to avoid signing up to that registration. How do we get to the irresponsible dog owners, Jason? Because it's those people and those dogs where these attacks are going to keep happening, isn't it?
Yeah. So I think Andy in the comments here has just pointed out more or less what we were saying, but the biggest loophole is it's very difficult to identify what is or isn't an XL bully, and I think that's a very fair point. So the one of the things we've been calling for in the Mirror campaign is much tougher regulation of the breeding of dogs and also the sale of dogs. I mean, at the moment, the laws are very weak, even not non-existent in some cases. Anybody can just breed dogs without a license and then sell them. And I think that would make a significant difference if you properly license this trade. There's all sorts of evidence that the breeding of vicious and dangerous dogs is linked to criminal gangs. It's linked to dog fighting, and it makes perfect sense to me to tighten the legislation on this. And
that's the second demand in the Mirror's demands about the campaigns. The first was an overhaul of the Dangerous Dogs Act, which hasn't happened. The second is to enforce the rules that already exist to stop illegal and irresponsible breeding, which hasn't happened. And a public information campaign about responsible dog ownership, which also hasn't happened. So
the public information campaign is going to, that's actually what we've done in other countries. They've done that in places like Austria and France. And it's not just public information. They actually make people who want to own certain breeds attend courses to actually kind of.
Well, again, this is one of the things. It's about if you're responsible, you're going to go on the course, aren't you? JC says it's more problem owner than problem dog. If you're the kind of person who doesn't really give a damn or is going to create those kind of dogs, then you're not going to go on the course. You're not going to do the thing. Now, firstly, perhaps this is kind of still happening because it's all a bit too soon. The ban's only just come in. Whether you're registered or not, it's going to take a while, perhaps, for everyone to sort of understand the new rules and sign up to things, get their dogs signed up, get them down the vet, all the rest of it. It was only in on sort of February the 1st, and it's February the 5th now. But, if someone wants... For example, I'll just read Lisa's comment. Lisa says the single biggest issue with the Dangerous Dogs Act is it's based solely on the appearance and measurements of the dog in question. There is no actual use of DNA to prove heritage or breed of that dog. It's ludicrous. And this is true. I've been down Battersea Dogs Home and seen perfectly well-behaved dogs in their sort of Dangerous Dogs Act pound that have been put there by the police and are under sort of sentence of death because the police have decided they look like they might be one of the banned breeds. Now, the police officer in question may not be a dog expert, don't know anything about it, but they're not analysing the dog to see if it is one of the banned breeds. They've just decided, and this is just someone that the police has come across, perhaps because the owner's died in their house or they've gone into a care home and the dog's been barking or something like that. And they've just gone and found this dog and decided that it's dangerous and therefore it gets killed. It's a bit bizarre. But, if someone wants an unneutered dog, if you're going to do this irresponsible breeding, and we know there was 8 puppies in this house, we don't know if it was responsible or irresponsible breeding. There are 8 puppies involved in this attack. It means it's in their financial interests not to neuter that dog, therefore not to register and not to sign up to the rules and to evade the authorities. And the rarer these bullies get or these type of dogs get because of the ban, the more likely it is that the price of those puppies is going to rise, and that financial incentive to avoid any kind of detection and to criminalise it's only going to increase, isn't it, Jason? I mean, in a way, if you want people to license for breeders and things like that, it's only going to, if you just have the Dangerous Dogs Act without that license for breeding, it's going to get worse and it's going to go underground, become part of the underworld.
I mean, there's always a danger of any new law you bring in, but it's going to drive people underground. I mean, I get that, but it's better than having no laws at all. I do think licensing breeding is a first step. I would go further personally. I would make sure that all dogs have to be microchipped, and I would look seriously at bringing back some form of dog licensing.
And again, people say that's the kind of thing that only responsible or wealthier people tend to do, but it could help. I do generally think that there should be a license to breed. I think like chipping and neutering should be automatic, pretty much. I do think that should be something that every owner is under some kind of compunction or pressure, social or otherwise, to actually have their dog neutered, because lots of people do not do that. I think if you don't want, and you would want to keep your animal unneutered because you're going to breed them, then that should get a license. I don't think you can license every dog. You can definitely license breeders, which would give powers to police and trading standards and people like that to go in when they see puppies advertised, whether it's on the dark web or anything else, then go in and have some arrests and capture people who are doing it irresponsibly. Dave says Staffy, the nanny dog, just because it's 21 inches tall, could be classed as an XL bully. It's known as a nanny dog because it's very good with children. And yes, some staffies, I can remember about 10, 20 years ago, and lots of outrage about staff. I think there were a couple of staffy attacks, and people decided that staffies were dangerous dogs. And it is generally, as everyone says, it's the owners that are the problem, and it's the owners we have to legislate for, isn't it? Now, but there's more to come out about this. First and foremost, the lady's lost her life. A grandson's lost his gran, and probably saw some of that happen. Esther's 2 daughters have spoken very movingly about the loss of their mum, who looks like a lovely lady from the photographs. Would this be resolved and just brought to head, and perhaps, the obvious and sensible things that we've been talking about here, Jason, would they actually be enacted if the people who were in charge of enacting things understood a bit more about, Esther and her family and the lives that get affected by this sort of thing?
This was the frustration we faced, Susie, when we launched the campaign on dangerous dogs, is that we kept on saying, if the victims of the dog attacks were often, not exclusively, but often from the poorer parts of the country, they were on estates outside of London. And we kept on going, if this had happened in leafy Surrey and the victim was a kind of, photogenic, kind of white, blonde-haired girl who went to a private school, the government would have acted years ago. And kind of, maybe that's unduly cynical, I don't know, but I always got that sense they just kind of didn't care because they didn't understand these people and they didn't know anything about them, and they could just kind of, and that's made us so angry, because we're just going, look, this is happening far too often, and it's just taken so long. I mean, I'm glad they've taken action on this finally, but it's not nearly enough. And it almost seemed like it was only because it kind of started to build a bit of a head of steam in the right-wing papers after we've been doing this for like 5 years. But you suddenly thought, we're listening. But there's so much more which can be done.
It's a bit like the sugar tax, I suppose, in a way. It just took them a long time to get round to it, because it became an issue of, libertarianism, and it was the people who were passing the laws for a decade were like, well, sugar's not our problem, we're fine having as much sugar as possible. We're not fat, kind of thing. And the fact that it was helping the nation as a whole, as a group of people, didn't really occur quite so much.